Parenting Up, Parenting Down is a member of the Queen City Podcast Network, powered by Ortho Carolina. Now offering video visits so you can take control of your orthopedic care from the comfort of your home. Schedule online at orthocarolina.com. Ortho Carolina, you improved.
Welcome to Parenting Up, Parenting Down, a podcast designed to support the sandwich generation, a rapidly growing population of people who find themselves taking care of not only their own children, but also their aging parents. We'll be offering resources, innovative thinking, and advice from support professionals, as well as stories from members of Gen Sandwich, real-life stories of victories and struggles from the parenting trenches. You're not alone. You're with us. We don't care whether you stand up or sit down. We're just really glad you're here. Enjoy this episode of Parenting Up, Parenting Down.
Elena, I'm so excited to be here with you today. We have a special guest with us, Kelly Childress, and we are going to be talking about loss and grief. We had a listener write in with a story that I thought was really appropriate to start our podcast off with today, and then we will introduce Kelly and get started on this great, important conversation. So this is one of our listeners, Loss and Grieving. My mom's mom died in November. It was tricky knowing what to say and how to comfort her in the weeks leading up to my grandmother's death. My mom spent 3.5 weeks with her in Florida as my grandmother's health deteriorated. My mom is not the warmest, fuzziest mom, and my dad is the one who wears his heart on his sleeve. My mom will clean the cluttery drawers with the toothbrush before sitting down to feel her feelings, but I digress. What I learned is that being there for the person is better than not being there for the person. It's not about your discomfort, it's about their grieving. Make the 19th awkward call of the week. Check in more than you think is normal. Send flowers, write cards. It's there if it's needed. If it's not needed or wanted at that moment, the person cannot take your call or not text you back or not open your mail. So my mom was grateful when my sister and I sent her flowers, sent my grandmother's best friends flowers, and they loved them. My mom and my aunt were so happy to deliver the bouquets. And my mom loved chatting with us most days. Sometimes we got her voicemail. Sometimes we got a really sad mom. And then maybe a few hours later, my sister would get a more relaxed mom. I think all our communication made her feel loved, but it was also a reminder of how much we loved our grandma, and that was just nice knowing at that moment.
What a beautiful story.
And that's such a big question for me. You know, it's a topic of conversation, when to reach out, when not to reach out. So I know we'll touch on that a little bit today, but we are so excited to have Kelly. Kelly is a healthcare mediator, a life coach for leaders, healthcare providers, high performers, and creatives who are at crossroads in their life and looking into activate their full potential. Kelly has spent the last 20 years as an activist, chaplain, consultant, and healthcare mediator. In her coaching practice, she works with people who want more from their lives than their present reality and feel they have a calling to do something greater, or who feel stuck at crossroads and are ready to create their life a beautiful, bigger life. I am so excited to have Kelly here today. Again, my name is Jen Olin. I am here with my co-host, Elena Recco-Bridgman, and we're so excited to have Kelly. Kelly, welcome.
Hi, thank you very much. Excited to be here.
I would love to know a little bit more about how you got into this field that you're working with and how you've become kind of our go-to expert on talking about loss and grief.
Yeah, I kind of backed into it, actually. It was, years and years and years ago. I had gotten out of college and I went to college late in my early 30s. And I was working as a political activist, and just the way things were shifting and I started to wonder, like, what else am I supposed to be doing? And I had a conversation with somebody who was a hospital chaplain, and that was what kind of clued me. And I felt like somehow there was a sense of call, and I just knew in that moment that's what I needed to do. So I started to pursue that path and ended up doing that for a number of years, leading department and being a hospital chaplain. So working alongside docs, nurses, RTs, respiratory therapists, and really just helping them deal with what was going on, but really accompanying patients, family members as they were working through the difficulties that they were experiencing, and a lot of end-of-life care.
Yeah, the subject of loss and grief is such a big subject. I have a really good friend who recently lost his mother, and one of the profound things that he said to me when I did my check-in to see how he was doing was, we were really grieving her, months before she actually passed away. So the grieving doesn't always just start when someone passes. I work at the Ivy, and we're dealing with people who have Alzheimer's and dementia and this progression of this disease. Those families start to grieve the loss of their loved one. It could be years before they've passed away. So what a big conversation. And it's not always about death either. It can start a whole lot earlier than that.
Yeah, and it's funny, that makes me remember, I can't remember the line exactly, but in the movie Steel Magnolias, Shirley MacLaine, is obviously they know that Julia Roberts is going to die in this. And at some point that happens. And she's been, upset and grieving before that. But the moment it happens, I can't remember the line, if you know what I'm talking about, but she kind of gets like, oh, now the world has just shifted on its axis. It's completely different now.
Mm-hmm.
So you do grieve in anticipation, and it's very different when it actually occurs.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we're talking about a little bit more about parenting up right now. And this is something that I deal with on a daily basis. But what are some of the shifts that can occur when a parent dies?
Some people are lucky to have parents who love them unconditionally. And I had that. And it can seem like when they die, that kind of love can die. So that can be a shift. And that's a pretty lonely feeling. Could be a sense of relief, like if they were suffering, if they did not want what was happening, and it was that kind of a situation, you can feel relieved that they don't have to go through that anymore. Conversely, if they were somebody that was a really hard individual, very toxic or abusive, that can feel like a relief as well. That's a little bit harder to acknowledge, both publicly, socially, but also to yourself. There can be a lot of guilt around that because that's your parent. So how do you work with that? How do you deal with that? Another shift is your identity. Somebody that had one or both parents, now you don't. So it's kind of shifting like who you were, who you are in the world. And I think mortality gets a lot more sharply focused than it was maybe before. 9 years ago, both of my parents died within about 5 months of each other. I had a bit of an easier time with my dad's passing because I had done a lot of forgiveness work around my relationship with my father years before. And he could be a little difficult to deal with in a moment, but I saw who he was at his heart. And I really was able to develop a great love and compassion for him. And I was fortunate to be able to be with him when he died. And that left me feeling sort of more complete. With my mom, I have so many regrets. And one of those is that I was not able to be with her when she died. Yeah, it was really, really a difficult time for me, because for me, like I said before, my parents did love me unconditionally. So when they died, I felt unconditional love for me was no longer available on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very, very painful. And it took me years, several years actually, to get to the point that I could even say that my mom had died.
Mm-hmm.
I would use euphemisms to describe that she had, passed away. And then I got to this point where I kind of felt like I was on an escalator, like we're all on this escalator and there's all of our, parents or grandparents are in front of us. But then when they start to fall off the edge of the escalator, then we see that we're there and, we're next in line. That freaked me out a lot, even though I've done a ton of work around death and dying and I have a very deep spiritual practice. I started to get like really afraid of death. Like, I don't want to keep going up that thing.
That's actually a very good visual. Wow.
Yeah.
I can picture that in my head.
Sorry.
No. I think that it's holds so true. You're right. And one of my biggest fears, and I think that this comes up in a lot of the conversations that we talk about, which is having open communication with our parents now when they're living too, right? I mean, because of the field I work in, working with seniors and their families, I've been working in it for so many years that it's always top of mind for me, that fear of when something's going to happen and your parents pass away. And I don't talk about it with them. And it's probably something that would be a little bit easier off my shoulders if I actually talked about it with them,
The other thing that I heard from the share that Kelly had was around the forgiveness in your story with working through that with your dad. And we recently talked about the other F word, forgiveness. And you just added another element to, why it's important. It's actually something we're going to talk about in a few weeks. We have another guest on talking about everyone as their greatness. But, the more that you can forgive and do the work in the relationship before they've passed, they've left this planet, the more, I'm not going to say it helps the process, but just the way that you shared it, Kelly, it sounds like it allows you to get to a place where you can be at peace maybe sooner or at your own pace versus it having to be like any regrets or guilt or shame or anything like that. So it's just another reason to forgive is what I was thinking about it, and to do the work and to have the conversations as uncomfortable as they might be while we still have everyone with us.
Absolutely. Certainly you can still do that work if they've passed on. So for those that have experienced that, but you can still do it. It is good to try and do it while they're still here. I think you probably talked about this when you had your forgiveness session, but forgiveness really is for the forgiver. It's not so much for the forgiving. They may have some benefit from it. They may feel some benefit from it. With my dad, I went through a period where I had so much really hatred towards him. He was a great guy. He had such a good heart, but he was an emotionally abusive alcoholic. And I had growing up so much hatred. And I realized I was like holding on to like a burning ember, like I was grabbing onto it and it was burning me. When I was able to open my hand and drop it through months of doing forgiveness work, it was one of the biggest reliefs I've ever experienced in my life. And it did create access for me to build a different kind of relationship with my dad. And it did have an impact on when he died, my grieving process. I have no doubt if I had still been holding on to all that anger and resentment, it would have complicated my grief. And the other thing I just want to go back to, it is helpful to be able to talk to your parents about what they want in the end of life. It is a difficult subject and they may not want to talk about it, and that's okay too. You have to respect that. And then you just have to sort of suss it out, like, who were they in their life that they would want, whatever interventions or not at the end. But it's really helpful if you know from them what they would want, how much of this, not of that, because then you're making the decisions they would want you to make.
Yeah, and we have a great episode on that too that just recently dropped. We're really happy about our Final Wishes episode too. It gives a lot of insight on that, but that's so true and just helps ease the burden a little bit more. I have a kind of random question. Is there a right way to grieve?
That's a great question, because I think that's something that we all ask ourselves. I know I did in times when I've grieved. One thing I think is important to note is in this time in the world right now, we are all in a state of collective grief that I think many of us have never experienced the like of which in our lifetime. Maybe none of us like this. And that's something to kind of pay attention to. But there's not really, I would say, a right way to grieve. I would say that there is your way to grieve. And it's more if you sort of not wrong ways, but if you try and avoid it, if you use substances to self-medicate, over a prolonged period of time, if you do other kinds of numbing activities for a prolonged period of time, that just lengthens the time that you're going to be in that state, that it's going to be sort of unresolved. So it's not to say that, denial has a place. Our bodies are going through something, our brains, our spirits, our hearts are going through something that will, as we get more ready and attuned to it, we'll open up more to it. So if we're in a little denial, it's okay. And if you want to have, the M&Ms or, a couple glasses of wine or whatever, that in itself isn't the problem. It's if you really just double down on that stuff over a longer period of time, I think it's going to get in the way of your process. And it's really just about allowing yourself to feel the feelings whenever you can. So part of it is really being kind to yourself and patient with yourself and practicing self-acceptance and love, because it's a really difficult thing to go through. Maybe creating new rituals, or even just rituals in general that help you feel like you're moving through something. It can help to make a list of things that help you feel peaceful in the midst of this. And so you don't have to think of things on the fly, but you can look at your list. Oh, maybe it would help me right now to just go for a walk around the block. I think it can help. We're sort of storytellers. It can really help to share our story. If we have some trusted person or people in our lives that we can share our story with and really allow ourselves to cry in front of, when we kind of clamp down on the quote unquote negative emotions, things that we don't really want to feel, like anger or pain or grief, we sort of naturally on the other end, without intending to, shut down the joyous, happy, peaceful emotions too. You can't really have one without the other. So spending more time allowing yourself to have that full expression. This is a human emotion, part of the way the body processes is to cry, to be able to let it out. And especially if you can be with people that you trust, who can just hold that space with you, that can be a wonderful way to just kind of give yourself some healing. Feel free to cut out people or things that vex your spirit.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, take a look at that. Where are you spending your energy, and what's that doing for you? It's okay to be a little selfish, especially when you're going through something like this, because it's really hard work. You know, if you had an amputation, everyone would know, well, that's going to take some time to recover. You're going to have a surgery, and you're going to have to learn how to, move your body in the world without this limb that you'd had before. There's a similar thing going on with grief.
Parenting Up, Parenting Down is sponsored by the Ivy Memory Wellness Center and in partnership with Luscious Mother, life and leadership coaching for moms.
Wash your hands, avoid sick people, and touching your face. There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. Brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
At Ortho Carolina, my personalized orthopedic care feels like home because video visits bring my provider to me. Ortho Carolina, my care, my way.
Schedule your appointment today at orthocarolina.com.
The Ivy Memory Wellness Center. What an incredible place this is, and what an incredible team. Unlike any team I've ever seen before, I get to work real closely with the life enrichment coordinators who put on the daily activities, both on-site and virtual, and also get the experience of helping our families. The Ivy really brings forward the whole family wellness experience. They have a lot of concentration in brain health and wellness, and they're a great place to call if you have a loved one dealing with any cognitive issues. At the Ivy, we not only can give families respite by taking care of their loved ones for a few hours each day and allowing them to get a little self-help and time to themselves, but we also put into place a lot of things like family care meetings where we meet one-on-one with the family and find out what struggles they're having at home and how we can help them through those struggles. The staff at the Ivy is the best staff I have worked with in my professional career. They are the type of people that come to work every day and they're in it because their true heart is there and it's what they want to do. The best way to find the Ivy is to go to our website, which is theivy.com, THEIVEY.com.
Get ready. Broadway is returning to Charlotte. Blumenthal Performing Arts has an incredible selection of upcoming hits, including the returns of Hamilton and Wicked, plus the long-awaited Charlotte debut of Disney's Frozen, and many more fan-favorite musicals and plays. Season tickets are on sale now at blumenthalarts.org/BPA Broadway.
You can find Parenting Up, Parenting Down on Facebook. Come join our community. We want to hear your stories.
One of my hardest losses to date was my Aunt Patty, my mom's sister. That loss was extremely difficult for her, and she said things, my mother said things, because it was her best friend and her sister that, what you said earlier about not really knowing who she was anymore, as an individual, because she had lost that. But for me, it was one of my hardest losses to date as well. And something that I noticed about myself in my grieving, and you're talking about kind of being a little selfish, and that's okay, is that I stopped hugging people. My Aunt Patty was a huge hugger, and I was with her when she passed. And I went through a period of time that I stopped hugging people, and I think it was a part of my grieving process. I'm not really sure how it was related. The funny thing is that, once I've kind of let myself do the grieving process and working through that death, that I'm more of a hugger now than I've ever been in my life. COVID's really been terrible for that, but I am a huge hugger, and it's become a huge part of who I am, and that I embrace that aspect of her. So, but I kind of had to go through this pause of, I don't know if it was fear of, another loss of abandonment or something like that, whatever that was, but that it took me a while to get through that until I felt comfortable touching and hugging people again and embracing them and letting them in to my life. And also, just a quick story around that too, is that after my Aunt Patty passed away, we noticed I'm going to make this story pretty short because it's longer. We noticed a lot of green hummingbirds for some reason. Like just randomly, we were seeing more hummingbirds, more green hummingbirds around. And I don't know if it was, that we were intentionally looking for them or what it was, but that has become a symbol for us. And whatever you believe in, whether that's her, whether it's just a thing that makes you think and reflect back nice, have wonderful feelings about this person, but that will be there for the rest of my life. It is just something that happened after she died, and it's a symbol that is stuck with me, and that helps me, and then honestly makes me feel good now every time that I see a hummingbird to think of her, and that reminds me of her. So kind of a story there that follows up on some of the tips that you were talking about with grieving, because I definitely have gone through multiple stages of that.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful when you can find those ways of connecting, because who knows what happens after we die, right? Like maybe she did come in the form of a hummingbird, or maybe she sent some hummingbirds to, give you a moment. Who knows, right? And it's beautiful to kind of consider that that's possible. I've had those experiences with my mom as well, and I've talked to lots of people who have had some kind of experience like that, where it was just, for them, it was beyond doubt. That was mom, or that was Aunt Patty, or whoever it was. And I think that's beautiful. And it can really, it's kind of one of those things that enhances life and helps you realize that we're all energy, we're all connected. And this, this sort of life and death experience, it may be less, finite than we sometimes think. And I was going to say too, just about, the feelings that you can express. You might be enraged, you might be furious, angry. Can you allow yourself to feel that as well? Can you give yourself love when you're really pissed off? You might be feeling all kinds of different emotions. You might feel happy, and you just never know what emotions are going to arise. If you can just allow yourself to feel them, that will help move the process forward.
Yeah, for sure. What would you say that caregivers need to help them build resilience?
Breathing. It's underrated, actually. I think engaging in doing breathing practices, breath practices, them in themselves are very healing, very grounding. They're good for your body, they're good for your brain, and it can help you in a moment when you're kind of stressed out to calm down your nervous system. So engaging in some breathing practices. The good news is there's so much information out there in the webosphere, or whatever you want to call it, that meditation practices and breathing. There's apps that you can use, like the Calm app is one that I use a lot, especially for the sleep stories. They're wonderful to help you fall asleep. But there's lots and lots of resources out there. So I would say it's another thing you can do to make a list, like to recognize, and I think this is important. It's actually a thing. When you're in grief, it can be exhausting. It's hard work. So it is really important to take care of ourselves. And especially if we've got kids or people who depend on us, there's a lot of people that will put themselves sort of last or low on the list. But you can imagine if you've got a cup of water and everybody's drinking out of it, and then when it comes to your turn, there's no water left. There's nothing left. There's nothing left to give or to get. And that's kind of a weird analogy, but it's really the same with us. We have a certain amount of energy every day, and then when it drains out, we get sleepy and we go to sleep. So what are we going to do with that energy? And part of that is how we take care of ourselves. So recognizing that we're doing hard work and we need to replenish ourselves. So what does that look like?
I think what I'm hearing in this conversation, Kelly, is as you're grieving, it's going to take even more, perhaps, or different, or and being prepared for that. I love what you've said now twice about making the list of the things that's going to support you during that time, and probably not when you're in the middle of it, right? Because that's not when you're going to be able to come up with it, but actually before, which actually leads me to my question and for you, Kelly, which is about, I'm going to tell myself, and I think I've mentioned this before, I'm terrified of my parents' mortality. And, it has me thinking that I'm woefully unprepared for the grieving process when that time undoubtedly will come one day in a long time from now, as I always joke and say. But I know, in my head, I know that that's super ignorant of me, right? So what can those of us that are parenting up, how can we prepare now for that grieving process? Because I'm in denial and have been for my whole adult life. So help the listeners out there that are in denial about the mortality of those that they're caring for.
Yeah. Well, one thing I would say is did you use the word ignorant? I would say
Yes.
it's just human. It's very, very
Thank you.
human. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I had the same thing, especially with my mom. I remember feeling horribly upset and terrified, probably most of my life, that something would ever happen to my mom. What I can say is when it finally did, I dealt with it. It was way worse in my mind all those years that I would think about it and suffer. And don't get me wrong, it sucks. It is not pleasant to go through the death of someone that you dearly love. That said, I think just working on kind of building your own sense of groundedness and self-love and trusting in yourself, doing what you need to do to feel like you're always kind of leaving it all on the table with them so that there's no regrets later on. So if you've got a difficult relationship with your parents, or maybe you've got a difficult relationship with them, what can you take on? And maybe they are not willing to go there, but you still have the opportunity to go there in yourself and work with yourself and my dad, he didn't want to talk about the fact that he was an alcoholic. He didn't want to talk about the ways that he had unintentionally caused harm to his children and to his wife. He didn't want to talk about any of that stuff. And I didn't need him for me to be able to do my work. So I would say that's really important for us to do our work so that we can create the space that we can be in whatever relationship is important to us with them, whether we spend time with them or whether we, choose not to spend time with them, that we can still feel like whatever we've needed to take care of, we could do that. So it frees us up. Then when it does happen, it's really hard and it's going to hurt. Mm-hmm. And you really have everything you need to be able to walk through that process.
That's such great advice. Absolutely. One thing that you said, and that you've said a couple different times that resonates with me, is the fact that grieving is hard work, right? And we're quick to say, oh, this person is depressed, and they could be. They absolutely could be. But the energy that your body has to feed to grieve is just emotionally, physically exhausting. So, just knowing and being aware of that you're tired, you're grieving, your body's working, your mind's working, really, really hard is just, I think, a great takeaway too for our listeners. I do want to, before we start to wrap things up, I do want to talk just a second on what our listener wrote in about. So, you've got your loved ones that are your friends, close friends, families who may have lost a loved one. And there is a fear sometimes of overstepping or being in the way or wanting to give somebody space and not being intrusive. So I think I know what your feedback is on that, but what's your feedback on that, on how do we reach out? How often do we reach out? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question because people really freak out about that. In part because we can be uncomfortable around grief and loss. We're not really raised how to deal with that, right? So when somebody's in grief or in loss, it can sort of be a sign like, oh, we want to give them their space. They're probably getting a lot of space. I would say err on the side of being connected and reach out. It's important to let them know, hey, you don't have to respond. There's nothing you have to do. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I will take care of me. I want to be here for you in any way that's helpful to you. So, for example, letting them kind of direct that and tell you can be useful. So if suddenly, 50 casseroles gets, taken over to somebody's house, oh my God, they've got all this food, they've got to wash all these dishes, right? People think they're helping. And sometimes that meal train is really helpful and important, but to check on it first. So whatever you want to do to reach out or offer support, check and see what's helpful to you, what's meaningful to you, and letting them know they don't have to do anything. They can be exactly as they are. And then to really just, hey, I don't know what it's like to go through what you're going through. I can see how much pain this is causing you. I'm so with you in this. And if there's anything I can do, I'm here for that. Or, gosh, I have a little bit of a feeling that my mom died last year and it's really been hard. And I just want to let you know that I'm here to, whatever it is, to kind of be connected with them. And also be careful not to sort of overshadow their story with your story.
Right.
This is a chance for me to talk about how my life sucks. They don't need that. So really, yeah, just being open, being kind, compassionate, giving them the chance to tell you what they need and making sure they know that you've got you. They don't have to worry about you. yeah, I think that's really helpful.
You are true. People are quick to get on the meal train when something happens. I recently,
Right?
when my friend, the same friend I was talking about, we called them and said, we want to do something. What can we do? We'd like to, if you'd like to do a couple of meals. And his wife says, no. We literally, we can't fit one more thing in our fridge. And I don't want them stressing about how they're going to store food. That's the last thing you want to do is cause more stress for a family. So I know it can be helpful at times, but we are very quick to get on that meal train for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say it's because I think it's because as humans we want to do something, right? We want to fix it, and that's all we like. Let's throw some food at it. Send a casserole,
Food makes everything better.
It's actually funny because one of the things I started to do, and this is sort of for when people are having babies as well, is actually not like jump on board right away with the loss or the baby comes, and actually wait several weeks and then deliver the food once all the casseroles have stopped coming so that they can continue to have the support that they need a month later, 2 months later.
Do some low carb meals for them. Well, Kelly, I want to make sure that you leave with our home run. I want you to be able to have a second here and make sure that you walk away and know that you gave our listeners the tips that you wanted to give them today. So what would that look like? What do you want to make sure that our listeners walk away with?
Well, one thing is we do want to fix it and we cannot fix it. So all we can do is just show up and be loving and kind. Self-care is absolutely critical. We do run out of steam. We do have a lot to deal with. And when you're taking care of everybody, when you're in grief, we've got to be able to put ourselves top of the list so that we can give ourselves the care we need so that we can get through the day and get to the next day and have energy. Self-care cannot be overstated. It's really, really important. And to find ways to do that work for you, walking, journaling, swimming, whatever it is that really lights you up or gives you some energy, to find those things and do that. It's okay to say no. It's okay to be quote unquote selfish. And it's going to take time because you're constructing, sort of a new reality. It's not grieving the loss of someone we love is not about getting over it. It's about integrating a different life. Life has changed. It won't ever be the same. So who are we now? And I found this quote by Rumi that I just love and I wanted to share. Grief can be the garden of compassion. If you keep your heart open through everything, your pain can become your greatest ally in your life's search for love and wisdom.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Please send that to me. We'll make sure that gets on the show notes as well as these tips to make sure that people walk away with from listening today. Kelly, we cannot thank you enough for being here and talking about this really important subject, not only for those who are experiencing loss, but also those who want to be supportive to those who are going through grieving and loss. So thank you so much for your time and for spending it with us today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for what you're doing and all the work you're doing. It's amazing. Thank you.
Parenting Up, Parenting Down is produced in cooperation with the Queen City Podcast Network and Balto Creative Media. It is recorded at the QCPN Studios at Advent Co-working in Charlotte, North Carolina.